Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to AITA Chronicles, where Reddit drama hits harder than a holiday dinner with your in-laws. Today's episode, pure chaos. We've got a fake wedding that turned way too real, a Costco membership feud, a Father's Day gone nuclear, and a man who thought flipping a baby bath was a solid argument strategy. Spoiler, it wasn't. These stories, they'll make you laugh, gasp, and text your best friend like, "Girl, listen to this mess." So whether you're cooking, scrolling, or low-key hiding from your own relationship drama, settle in. Because every story today will have you asking, wait, how do they think they're not the asshole? And hey, don't forget, hit like, subscribe, and tap that bell. We're pushing for 10K subs, and every click helps keep the madness coming. All right, let's get into it. Starting with a groom who ran from the altar and left more than a bouquet behind. Am I the asshole for abandoning my wife at the altar? The writer, a 28-year-old man, begins his story not just in a different country, but in a different world altogether. He grew up in a deeply conservative, traditional South Asian culture, the kind of place where family honor can weigh more than personal happiness, where expectations are passed down like heirlooms, and where the truth, if it's not convenient, often gets buried beneath duty and silence. But life has a strange way of giving us detours. The writer moved to the United States for his education, and there he found something he never expected: freedom, identity, and most importantly, love. He met the man who would become his husband. Coming out to his parents was not a celebration, it was a confrontation, one that didn't end in disownment, but certainly didn't come with warm hugs and rainbow flags either. They tolerated it in the way that conservative parents sometimes do, quietly, reluctantly, and with the desperate hope that maybe somehow it would all still go away. But the past has a long memory. Recently, the writer received a call from his father. His grandfather, aged and ailing, wanted to see him married before he passed, a dying wish from a man who never even knew his grandson was gay, let alone married. The family had hidden this truth from him, claiming he was too fragile to bear it. And here's where the noose starts to tighten. At first, the writer refused. How could he possibly entertain this idea? But then came his husband, his rock, who reminded him that this was going to be a fake marriage, a staged ceremony, a performance for tradition's sake, a last act of compassion for a dying man who lived in a different era. And there was another complication: inheritance. Grandpa's will was no small matter. The writer was being promised a generous inheritance, but it was tied to this symbolic wedding. It wasn't just emotional blackmail anymore, it had financial strings too. So reluctantly, he agreed. But here's where everything begins to unravel. During the pre-wedding events, the writer assumed everyone was in on the script, that the bride-to-be knew this wasn't real, that this whole charade was transparent behind the scenes. He figured everyone was just playing a role, just like him. But when the ceremony began, when they brought out real legal registry papers to sign in front of his grandfather, it hit him like a truck. This wasn't a performance anymore. This was real. The writer's parents hadn't told anyone, not the bride's family, not even the bride herself, that this was fake. They orchestrated an actual wedding, and the writer was standing there as a pawn in a lie he never signed up to perpetuate. What do you do when the trap you're in is closing faster than you can think? You run. The writer, in the middle of his own wedding, came out publicly to everyone. He told the truth, that he was gay, that he was already married, that this whole thing was a farce, and then he got on the earliest flight and left. Cue the fallout. When he returned home to the US, the storm was already brewing. His mother told him that the bride's family, rightfully furious, had publicly shamed his grandfather, that the humiliation and disgrace made him fall ill, that this betrayal, this selfish act, broke something in the old man, and now she's calling him the asshole. But is he? Let's sit with that. He agreed to a fake wedding, not a real one. He was willing to lie for the sake of tradition, for an old man's dying wish. But the deal changed without his consent. He was thrown into a legal commitment with a stranger, without her knowledge, without her consent. And that's not just deceptive, that's cruel. Imagine the bride, standing there, thinking this is the happiest day of her life, unaware that she's being used in a family ruse. Would it have been kinder for the writer to go along with it? To sign papers that bound another human being into a lie? Or was his honesty, though chaotic and painful, the only moral option left? Yes, his timing was disastrous. Yes, the fallout was immense. But in that moment, faced with lies collapsing all around him, the writer chose truth. And truth, even when it hurts, is often the only path to dignity. So, am I the asshole for abandoning my wife at the altar? No. You were manipulated, pressured into a plan that shifted without your knowledge. You escaped before making a mistake that would have ruined 2 lives, not just your own. You spared a woman from unknowingly marrying a man who could never truly love her the way she deserved. It's not clean. It's not heroic. But it is human. And sometimes being human means choosing the right thing at the absolute worst time. Am I the asshole for telling my husband that him leaving wouldn't impact our lives? Sometimes a single sentence holds years of exhaustion. One moment that finally breaks the dam. Not because you stopped caring, but because you've been caring alone for far too long. This isn't a petty fight over who's doing the dishes or forgetting to take out the trash. This is about the kind of home a child is raised in, the kind of man a father chooses to be or refuses to become. The writer, a 29-year-old mother, is less than 3 months postpartum. She's not just healing from childbirth. She's already trying to balance motherhood, household duties, and the looming pressure of returning to work full-time. And at the center of it all, the question of who will care for their newborn son. Her husband, 32, wants to rely on the grandparents, specifically his parents and the writer's mother. But the writer, she knows what's at stake. She's been watching, observing, documenting the ways her in-laws dismiss modern safety standards, belittle her concerns, and undermine her as a mother. They brush off new information about SIDS prevention, scoffing at research with lines like, "You're letting these guidelines drive you crazy," or worse, "My kids would have been dead 100 times over with what I did." It's not just ignorance, it's arrogance, and it terrifies her because at the end of the day, it's not about opinions, it's about a baby's life. But that isn't the only battle the writer is fighting. Behind closed doors, there's a deeper issue simmering, her husband's temper. And it doesn't just show up in words, it explodes. The night things boiled over, she was preparing a bath for their baby on the kitchen counter, just trying to get through one more task in a day full of them, when her husband, enraged over their disagreement, flipped the tub. Gallons of water flooded their kitchen, documents destroyed, floors soaked. Let that sink in. While she was baby-wearing their 3-month-old child, her husband didn't just lose his temper, he lost control, and instead of calming down or walking away, he blocked her from leaving the house. She had to flee on foot with her newborn just to feel safe. Safe from the man she shares a home with. And the part that breaks your heart? This isn't new. During her pregnancy, he punched a hole in their wall. He grabbed her shirt hard enough to rip it. He's destroyed her belongings. He always apologizes afterward, promising to do better. But apologies without change are just words. And over time, words rot into lies. So when he returned home after leaving for almost 24 hours without a single word, and the conversation twisted into him threatening divorce because she didn't immediately agree to have another baby, she didn't yell, she didn't beg. She simply said, "File the paperwork." Because what else do you say to someone who treats fatherhood like a checklist and marriage like a weapon? What else can you do when the person who should be your partner treats every conversation like a battlefield? The writer isn't just emotionally drained, she's functioning in survival mode. And the saddest part? She's starting to feel like she's the problem. Like maybe she was too harsh. Like maybe saying it wouldn't make a difference. If he left makes her the villain. But let's pause here, let's be honest. This man abandoned her and their child for almost 24 hours after a violent outburst. He's consistently refused to take on real parenting responsibility. And when pressed about plans for consistent childcare, he shrugs and says, "Handle it," when everything in her already knows he won't. This isn't just about childcare. This is about trust. And the writer's is shattered. Even now, days later, it's her taking the garbage out at 5 a.m. because he forgot. It's her planning, prepping, worrying, protecting. And it's him, making threats, vanishing, showing up too late with too little every single time. And yet, she questions herself. Because that's what happens when you've been gaslit into thinking that needing stability makes you too controlling, that protecting your child makes you dramatic, that speaking up about emotional abuse makes you the problem. But no, the writer is not the asshole. She's a mother fighting for her child's safety and her own sanity. She's a woman holding a collapsing marriage together with trembling hands and asking herself whether this constant volatility is what she wants her son to grow up watching. It's not about not wanting her husband. It's about not recognizing him anymore. Not trusting that the man who punched walls and flipped bathtubs is capable of giving their child the emotional security they deserve. Her words, "It wouldn't make a difference if you left," weren't heartless. They were the painful truth spoken by someone who has been left behind long before he ever walked out the door. Final verdict, not the asshole. What the writer needs now isn't validation from her husband. It's safety, clarity, and peace. And if that means doing it alone, she's already doing it. She's been doing it. And in the eyes of her son, she's already the one showing up every day, without fail. Sometimes the strongest love isn't the one that stays and suffers. It's the one that walks away so a child can grow up in a home that doesn't feel like a war zone. My boyfriend playfully grabbed my face during an argument. I called it violent. Am I the asshole? Some stories don't start with shouting. They don't begin with slammed doors or black and white moments of cruelty. Sometimes they start quietly, with a single gesture that sits wrong in your bones, something you can't fully explain, but you feel it. And once that feeling lands, it's nearly impossible to shake. The writer is a 23-year-old woman, 2 years deep into a relationship with a man nearly 6 years older. He's 29. And from the start, their connection has been described as passionate. That word can mean a lot of things. Fireworks, big love, big fights. But here, it comes with a warning label, sometimes too passionate. That already tells us something. The emotional temperature in this relationship doesn't stay at room temp. It's swinging, fast, hard, and unpredictable. So when the writer shares what happened last week, it starts like so many small fights do, over something seemingly trivial. Her boyfriend was upset that she hadn't answered his call while at work, a minor inconvenience for most people. But for him, it spiraled. He pushed. She pushed back. She reminded him firmly that she's not a child and doesn't owe him an hourly report on her whereabouts. That should have been the end of it. A disagreement, a pause, a reset. But then he got close. Closer than usual. Let's pause right there. Anyone who's been in a heated moment knows how the space between bodies starts to matter. Personal space isn't just about distance, it's about power. And when someone invades that space during an argument, it sends a clear message. I'm in control here. Now, he didn't shout, he didn't raise a hand to strike. Instead, he did something subtler, but just as unsettling. He reached up and grabbed the writer's face, not in a sweet way, not in affection. He pinched her cheeks between his fingers like you might do to a child or a doll, except she's neither. He smiled, but his hand was tense. And that is the moment, the flashpoint, the moment where her gut screamed louder than any words. Because sometimes it's not about the size of the gesture, it's the intention behind it. And the truth is, a forced smile does nothing to soften a power move. The writer pulled back, stunned, and she said what so many people are afraid to say in the heat of the moment: don't ever do that again. But his response? It wasn't an apology. It wasn't acknowledgement. He laughed it off, called it playful, said she looked ridiculous yelling like that. Let's be clear here. Dismissing someone's fear as an overreaction isn't just invalidating, it's manipulative. When someone minimizes what scared you, they're trying to convince you that your reality didn't happen. The writer didn't stay silent. She told him, it felt demeaning, controlling, physical in a way that crossed a line. And then he went even further. You're really gonna cry abuse over a love tap? That line alone sends a chill down the spine. Because it's not just gaslighting, it's weaponized guilt. It's flipping the script so that he becomes the victim and she becomes the problem. He made a choice, she reacted with healthy boundaries, and now suddenly she's ruining his life. This is the point in the story where the writer did something powerful. She left. She didn't just let it slide. She didn't let the tension boil over into something worse down the line. She stepped away. And now he's texting her, blaming her for everything, saying she's trying to ruin a man's life over nothing. But the thing is, it wasn't nothing. It was something. It was enough. Because when a partner reaches out in the middle of an argument and grabs your face, not with love, not with tenderness, but with force, that's not a joke. That's not flirting. That's a warning shot dressed up as play. It's the kind of moment that splits the story in two, before and after. And now the writer is asking the question, am I the asshole for calling that violent? Was it an overreaction? No, you're not the asshole. You saw something shift. You felt it. You recognized the undercurrent of control disguised as affection. And you did what so many people struggle to do. You trusted your instincts. It wasn't about that one moment. It was about the tone, the tension, the way he dismissed your fear and painted himself as the victim. And here's the quiet truth. The first red flag isn't always a scream. Sometimes it's a smile with clenched hands behind it. So no, writer, you're not the asshole. You're not dramatic. You're not overreacting. You're awake now. And the saddest part, he probably thought you wouldn't be. He probably thought he could get away with disguising control as play. But you left. And that is your power. Am I the asshole for not listening to my husband when he told me to go inside? Some stories don't begin with shouting. They begin with small, quiet betrayals, moments that feel like they could be brushed off until they build, layer by layer, into something that cuts deep. That's where the writer finds herself. It was supposed to be a regular day, nothing unusual, the kind of day you move through on autopilot, cooking dinner, prepping food for the freezer, minding your own business while your husband steps outside to talk to his father. A private moment between men, the kind of conversation that doesn't usually include the wife. And fine, writer respected that. She stayed inside, she gave them space. But sometimes giving space means giving too much room to things you never agreed to. Let's rewind a bit. The writer's husband, he has a heart condition. Not just some vague, distant diagnosis either. This is real, serious. And one of the hardest things he's been trying to do is quit smoking. Because even one cigarette, just one, could trigger something as life-threatening as a stroke. That's not just bad luck, that's a medical fact. So, in their household, a rule was set. No cigarettes, not in the house, not on the property, no exceptions. It's a boundary that exists not out of control, but out of love, protection, a survival line. Everyone knows it, including the husband's father. Now back to that quiet evening. After about an hour of conversation outside, the writer takes a peek out the window, and what does she see? Her father-in-law is handing her husband a cigarette. Let that sink in. This isn't just a violation of house rules. This is a man encouraging his son with a diagnosed heart condition to put something in his body that could kill him. No dramatics here, that's the reality. The writer didn't explode. She didn't run outside screaming. She walked out, firm, angry, but still composed. She wanted answers. She wanted her husband to explain why. Why would he take something so dangerous from the very person who's supposed to care about him? But before she could even speak, she was shut down. Not just by her husband, but by her father-in-law, who snapped at her with a tone sharp enough to draw blood. Yes, her name, go inside. Now pause. Imagine hearing that on your own property in front of your husband. A man speaks to you like you're an unwelcome guest in your own home, and your partner says, nothing. That's the wound. Not the cigarette. Not even the insults that would follow. The wound is being told to stand down while you're being disrespected, out loud, in your own space. So no, she didn't go inside. She stayed, and she said what needed to be said. She called out the fact that the cigarette shouldn't have been there, that her husband had a medical condition that made this not just a bad idea, but a threat to his life. But the moment she said it, the floodgates opened. The father-in-law didn't apologize. He didn't explain. He attacked, said she was lazy, said she should get off her ass, said she should get a job, insult after insult, curse after curse, all of it flung like knives right there in the driveway. And once again, her husband said, go inside. No defense, no pushback, just silence. At that moment, what choice did the writer have? She fought back. She insulted him right back. Because if no one was going to speak up for her, she'd speak up for herself. Now, in the aftermath, her husband tries to explain. He says he knew what his father said was disrespectful, but he claims he wanted her inside so he could handle it himself. Says his father doesn't respect women and wouldn't hear anything if the writer was present. But let's call that what it is, a weak excuse. Because the issue isn't just about the insult, it's about the invasion. Her father-in-law came into her space, broke their rules, endangered her husband, then disrespected her and suspected her. And instead of protecting his wife, the husband chose to manage the optics. He wanted her out of sight so he could handle things man to man. But here's the truth. If a man won't stand up for his wife in front of someone who disrespects her, then what's he standing for at all? The writer's left asking the hard question. If your father can't respect me, why should he be welcome on my property? Because that's what it boils down to. Not ego, not pride, but respect. Basic human respect. And let's not ignore the elephant in the room. This wasn't a one-off. The writer doesn't trust this man. She's never liked him. And now that she's seen how far he's willing to go, even risking his own son's health just to light up a cigarette, she sees him clearly. And what she sees is someone who doesn't just lack respect, he thrives on disrespect. So here we are. The writer didn't listen. She stayed outside. She stood her ground. She defended herself when no one else would. So now, she asks the world, am I the asshole for not listening to my husband when he told me to go inside? Or was she simply doing what her husband wouldn't, drawing a line in the dirt and saying, this is my home, you don't get to walk over me here? Am I the asshole for ruining my sister's engagement by telling her fiancé she's been married before? Weddings are supposed to be moments of joy, unity, and new beginnings. But sometimes what lies buried in the past refuses to stay there. And when it finally surfaces, it doesn't just shake one person, it ripples through an entire family. The writer never set out to cause chaos. It was supposed to be a celebration, an engagement party filled with congratulations, toasts, and promises for the future. Their sister, 31, had just gotten engaged to Ben, a 33-year-old man who was, by all accounts, thoughtful, sweet, and perhaps a little old-fashioned. The kind of guy who speaks about marriage with reverence. Someone who talks about doing things right the first time. And that's where the tension begins. Because Ben, he believed this would be his first marriage, and hers too. But what he didn't know, what the writer's sister never told him, is that this wouldn't be her first walk down the aisle. Years ago, at just 24, she had what she calls a non-marriage. A whirlwind Vegas wedding that lasted all of 6 months. It was so fast, so chaotic, and ended so quickly with an annulment that in her mind, it didn't even count. It was a blip, a mistake, a piece of history she'd rather pretend never happened. So she didn't tell him, and maybe she never planned to. But secrets like that, they're fragile. One loose thread, and the whole thing unravels. It started innocently enough. The writer was chatting with Ben's sister. Small talk, laughter, light teasing. Until the sister made a comment, Ben's so lucky he finally found someone who's never been married after all the divorced women he's dated. That was the moment. The split second where the writer could have smiled and said nothing, but didn't. Maybe it was nerves, maybe it was surprise. Maybe it was just one of those unthinking slips that comes from assuming the truth was already out there. But the word slipped, yeah, well, sort of. And that was enough to crack the surface. Ben's sister asked for clarification, and the writer gave it, truthfully but casually. She had a Vegas marriage once, annulled, like a month long. It barely counted. Now let's pause here. The writer didn't shout it across the room, didn't grab a mic and make a toast about skeletons in the closet. It wasn't a betrayal of malice. It was a fumble, a misstep. The kind of mistake anyone could make in a conversation that moves too fast to second-guess yourself. But once those words left the writer's mouth, the dominoes fell fast. Ben found out, and it didn't go quietly. He pulled the writer's sister aside. Voices were raised. Tension cracked through the party like a lightning bolt. The night ended early, and the celebration, the joy, the clinking glasses, the smiles, turned into a crater of awkwardness and resentment. Now, the writer's sister is furious. She says the writer had no right to say anything, that it wasn't the writer's story to tell. that this was a private part of her past, something that should have stayed buried, especially from Ben's family. But here's the thing. Did the writer really ruin anything? Or was this all bound to come out eventually? Because let's be honest, this was never going to stay a secret forever. Marriage records exist, family stories slip out. Someone from the past could have said something at any moment. And Ben, he's not mad because he found out from the writer. He's mad because he wasn't told at all. He made it very clear how important first marriages are to him. He spoke about doing it right. Whether you agree with that value system or not, the fact is, it mattered to him. And she chose not to tell him the truth. Not because she was ashamed necessarily, but because she believed that her version of the past was the only one that mattered. But relationships aren't built on half-truths. They're built on shared reality. Ben should have heard it from the person he was committing to, not from a slip at an engagement party. But the writer didn't set out to expose anything. They genuinely thought he already knew. So, is the writer the asshole? No. The writer made an honest mistake, not a calculated move. This wasn't sabotage, it was a slip. An awkward moment that spiraled far beyond their control. If anyone's to blame for the damage, it's the fragile web of silence that the writer's sister wove around her past. And while she may see it as irrelevant, the reality is, if it mattered this much to Ben, then leaving it unsaid was always going to be a gamble. What's really unraveling here isn't an engagement, it's the illusion of trust, and that was never the writer's to maintain. Am I the asshole for removing my sister from my life after she asked my wife to divorce me? Some betrayals don't come from strangers. They come from the people you least expect, the ones who share your childhood, your blood, your memories, the ones who should be in your corner by default. And that's what makes this story so gut-wrenching. The writer finds himself standing in the middle of two powerful loyalties, his sister and his wife. But this isn't just a tale of disagreement. This is a story about boundaries, respect, and what happens when someone crosses a line so deep it shatters the relationship entirely. The writer is a husband, but he's also a brother. And for as long as he can remember, his older sister, someone who should have been there with love and support, has made it very clear that she does not like his wife. From the beginning, she disapproved of their relationship. No warm welcome, no sincere congratulations, just cold shoulders, passive-aggressive remarks, and a consistent air of disdain. Still, the writer's wife, gracefully, patiently, tolerated it for the sake of peace, for the sake of family. And let's not underestimate how hard that is. It's no small thing to hold your tongue and stay composed while someone close to your partner treats you like you're disposable. But this time, the line wasn't just crossed, it was obliterated. Because today, the writer's wife revealed something chilling. The sister didn't just insult her, didn't just throw subtle digs. She picked up the phone and told her to divorce him. Let that sit for a second. Imagine being in a marriage thinking that even if things aren't perfect, family will respect your choices. And then you find out your sister, the woman who stood next to you in family photos, is actively trying to dismantle your relationship from the inside. That's not concern. That's sabotage dressed up as love. Naturally, the writer confronted her. Calmly. He didn't yell. He didn't retaliate. He asked the question that anyone in his shoes would ask, why, and what did she say? She claimed his wife was controlling him, that he only married her out of insecurity, that they weren't a good match. But who is she to decide that? When the writer reminded her that both families had approved the marriage, that he had chosen this woman with love and intention, his sister still held her ground. She insisted she was just trying to help, that this was about love, that she was not his enemy. But that's the thing. If you're truly on someone's side, you don't go behind their back and call for their marriage to be destroyed. You don't humiliate their partner and act like you're doing them a favor. Love doesn't sneak. Love doesn't manipulate. And here's where the writer took a stand. A bold one. A painful one. He told her, if you cannot respect my wife, if you cannot respect our marriage, then you are no longer a part of my life. Not just for me, but for her too. We are done tolerating this disrespect. That's a hard sentence to say. Cutting off a sibling is not something people do lightly. There are years of birthdays, inside jokes, childhood laughs, all tangled into that bond. But when someone becomes toxic to your future, no amount of shared history should give them a pass. The writer chose his wife, chose peace, chose respect. And make no mistake, this wasn't about taking sides between two people who simply didn't get along. This was about one person, his sister, crossing a sacred boundary and trying to tear down something he built with love. Now, understandably, the writer feels torn. His sister cried. She said she was just trying to help. She said he should trust her, that she wouldn't ruin him. But isn't that what she was already doing? When you love someone, you support them, even if you don't agree with every detail of their life. You don't try to dismantle their happiness behind their back. You don't paint their spouse as the villain in a story they chose to live in. And now, the writer asks the world, am I the asshole for cutting her out, for protecting my wife, for choosing my future over my past? No, you are not the asshole. You saw the iceberg, and you didn't wait for the crash. You took the wheel. You made the choice that too many people are afraid to make. You chose to protect the partner who chose you. It hurts. It absolutely does. But love isn't just about who you grew up with. It's about who shows up for you now, who honors your choices, who treats your spouse with dignity. And if anyone refuses to do that, then removing them from your life isn't cruelty. It's survival. Am I the asshole for refusing to loan money to my sister for my niece's college fund after she spent most of it on prom? There's something sacred about the idea of planning for someone's future, especially when that someone is a child you've watched grow up, someone whose life hasn't been easy. That kind of hope, that kind of investment, it's not just about money. It's a promise, a quiet, persistent act of love. And the writer, let's be clear, was doing exactly that. She's 37, married, a mother herself. Not rich, not extravagant, just careful, stable. Someone who knows the value of slow, steady progress. And she has a sister, 40 years old, a single mom who's been raising her daughter alone for 17 years. Life hasn't been smooth for her sister. There have been struggles, and the writer has done her best to be supportive. Not perfect, not a savior, just there. The kind of sister who shows up, quietly, consistently. About 5 years ago, the writer began setting aside money for her niece's college fund. Nothing massive, not trust fund levels, just bits and pieces, a birthday gift here, a small slice of a tax return there, a couple hundred from a work bonus. It added up over time. She and her sister agreed explicitly that this fund was for college, not groceries, not a shopping spree, not for rent or hair or holidays or anything else. College only. By the time April rolled around this year, that fund had grown to a respectable $11,000. Then came prom. Now look, prom is a big deal. It's a teenage milestone wrapped in glitter, dresses, and rented limousines. And when the writer saw the photos, she was proud. Her niece looked radiant, like she was walking out of a movie scene. The pale blue dress, the updo, the polished nails, the friends, the fancy restaurant, the limo, the works. The kind of prom night you only see in Pinterest albums or high school movies. The kind of night that says, you belong. But with all that sparkle came a question that hit hard and fast. How did they pay for all of it? It wasn't long before the answer came, and it hit like a punch to the gut. The writer had been casually checking on some finances earlier that week. Nothing suspicious, just managing the account where the college fund lived, which, mind you, is also in her name. And then she saw it. $7,000. Gone. Not missing. Not stolen. Spent. And it wasn't a mistake. It wasn't some weird charge. It was her sister. Quietly, without so much as a phone call, she had siphoned off $7,000 from her daughter's future for one night of glamour. And that's where things started to unravel. When the writer called, her sister didn't even sound surprised. No shock. No shame. Just vague excuses and a tone that drifted between, it's not a big deal, and why are you overreacting? She defended the decision, said there was still enough left for community college if her daughter didn't get a scholarship. Like that somehow made it okay. But let's just pause right here. This wasn't a loan. This wasn't a discussion. This was a theft. And not just of money, but of trust, of a dream, of a future someone had painstakingly tried to build for a child who deserved better than a gamble on what might be enough. The writer didn't scream. She didn't lash out. She told her sister she was shocked. And then, as if that wasn't enough, her sister had the audacity to ask for another $2,000 to rebuild the fund later on when things weren't so tight. That's when the writer drew the line. She said no, calmly, clearly, just no. And that's when the meltdown began. Her sister accused her of holding money over her head, claimed this exposed the writer's true colors, that she didn't care about her niece, that she was selfish. And then the manipulation took a familiar turn, dragging in their mother and other relatives. Suddenly, it wasn't about college funds or broken promises. It was about family sticking together, about prom only happens once, and about how the writer was making a big deal out of something that was for the greater good. And then came the worst part. Her niece texted her. A 17-year-old girl caught in the crossfire of adult betrayal. She said she didn't know the money came from her college fund. She was sorry, and she didn't want them to fight. That text, that cut deep. Because for the writer, this wasn't about being right. It wasn't about money. It was about a commitment to a young woman she'd tried to help succeed, whose life had already been shaped by struggle and sacrifice. It was about watching that trust get shattered and being made out to be the villain for expecting accountability. She feels like garbage. Of course she does, because she cares. Because saying no when someone is spiraling makes you feel like the bad guy, even when you know deep down it's the right call. She's got her own daughter, a college fund they've built up slowly, carefully, just like this one. She can't just casually toss thousands into the wind because her sister chose prom over planning. And her husband, he's standing by her. He says they can still help her niece in the future, if needed, but directly, not through the sister, not through the person who burned the bridge and then lit a match under anyone who dared ask why. So now the writer's left with her integrity, her frustration, and her aching heart. And she's asking, am I the asshole for refusing to loan money to my sister after she spent most of my niece's college fund on prom? Let's call it like it is. No, you are not. What you are is tired. You're heartbroken. You're a woman who tried to do right by her niece, and now you're the scapegoat because you wouldn't enable more recklessness. This isn't about being stingy. It's about boundaries. And your sister crossed one without blinking and expected you to just hand over more. You're not the villain here. You're the only one who remembered what that fund was for in the first place. Am I the asshole for asking my boyfriend to reconsider our 50-50 financial split after moving in together? At first glance, it seems like a math problem. 2 adults, 1 apartment. Split the costs right down the middle. Seems fair, right? But life isn't lived on paper, and relationships, real ones, aren't balanced by equations. They're measured by effort, empathy, and how deeply 2 people are willing to understand each other's reality. The writer, 26 years old, is in education, a profession rooted in compassion, patience, and purpose, but unfortunately, not in money. She's been with her boyfriend, who's 28 and working in tech, for nearly 2 years. On the surface, everything looks good. They've made it through the dating phase, taken that big step, and moved in together about 6 months ago. And that's where things started to feel off. They split rent and bills 50-50, a clean, logical division. But here's the rub. Her boyfriend makes nearly 3 times what the writer does. That equal split, it's not really equal at all. It's bleeding her dry. Half her paycheck evaporates into rent alone. Gym membership? Canceled. Nights out? Rare if ever. Meanwhile, he's out on weekend trips with the boys and treating himself to a PS5 like it's just another Tuesday. Now let's pause here. Is this about jealousy? Resentment? No, it's about imbalance, invisible yet exhausting. Because while she's not only covering half the financial load, she's also quietly taking on the bulk of the emotional and domestic labor. Groceries, cooking, cleaning, laundry. Not because he's demanding it, but because he's just not doing it, unless she specifically asks. That's the part that hurts, isn't it? When your partner doesn't even realize or chooses not to see that you're holding more than your share of the weight. So the writer brings it up, gently, honestly. She's not demanding anything wild, not asking for him to cover all expenses. She just wants to talk, to maybe rework the deal so it reflects their real circumstances. And how does he respond? You're being unfair. You knew what this was. You chose your career. That last one, that stings, because it reduces her life's passion, teaching, nurturing, building minds, to a bad financial decision, as if her job, her identity, is now a burden he's being forced to carry. He even warns her, if they start adjusting for income, what's next? Keeping score on everything? But here's the thing. They're already keeping score. Just not openly. She's counting every dollar she spends. She's counting every dish she washes, every time she folds his socks while he plays games or books another trip. She's counting, not because she wants to, but because she has to survive in the life they've both built. Let's talk about the apartment for a second. According to the writer, their place is his pick, more expensive than her previous one. And when she hesitated, feeling insecure about her lower income, he reassured her, said it would be fine, that it would be equal, that they'd figure it out. But once they moved in, it stopped being equal. His promises, they faded. And now she's the one paying for that comfort with her wallet, her energy, and her peace of mind. So, is the writer the asshole for wanting to change the arrangement? For asking her boyfriend to meet her where she's at, not just financially, but emotionally? No, absolutely not. The writer is not the asshole. What she's asking for isn't a handout. It's not entitlement. It's a call for fairness. Not just 50-50 on a spreadsheet, but something that actually feels fair in the context of their real lives. Relationships are supposed to be partnerships, not survival exercises. And if one person is constantly compromising while the other coasts, that's not love, that's imbalance, that's slow erosion. To the writer, you're not asking for too much, you're asking for what you were promised, an equal partnership. And if that's threatening to him, then maybe the issue isn't your income, maybe it's his commitment. Final verdict, not the asshole. This isn't about money, it's about respect. And you, writer, have every right to ask for more of it. Am I the asshole for telling my girlfriend we can't live together and to split expenses proportional to income? This one's not just about money. It's about principles, about boundaries, about where partnership begins and where it crosses into imbalance. The writer is a 28-year-old man. On paper, he's doing well. He runs a small but growing construction company with a friend. He lives in a house owned by his grandparents, rent-free at their insistence, and he's been dating his girlfriend for 2 years. Now, here comes the twist. The girlfriend, who's currently in grad school and scraping by on a tiny stipend and student loans, wants to move in. And sure, that seems logical. Rent is skyrocketing, her expenses are overflowing, and her situation is becoming unsustainable. She's drowning under medical bills, credit card debt, car payments, and even her rent eats up most of her income. On the surface, moving in with the writer could solve a lot of her problems. And from her perspective, maybe this is just a natural step forward in their relationship. But this isn't just a love story. This is a story about money and the kind of quiet resentment that builds when financial expectations are mismatched. Let's talk logistics. The writer doesn't pay rent. His friend, who currently lives with him, covers the utilities as his rent. That's the arrangement. Simple, clean. But the girlfriend wants the friend out, understandably, if they're going to share a home as a couple. The friend's fine with it. No drama there. Where the real drama starts is when the writer brings up how they should handle finances, specifically joint expenses. He proposes a 50-50 split. Straightforward. Equal. But she says no. She wants proportional, meaning since he earns more, he should cover a much bigger share of everything. On paper, that sounds fair, right? People often say proportional splits make sense in relationships where incomes differ. But here's the wrinkle that changes everything. The writer isn't just talking numbers, he's talking philosophy. Because if she wants proportional, wants him to carry the bulk of the financial load, then shouldn't that come with shared decision-making? Shouldn't that mean pooling resources, budgeting together, being open and honest about money? But that's not what's happening. In fact, the writer reveals something pretty significant. Every time he brings up finances, it turns into a fight. She gets defensive, dismisses his concerns, keeps her spending habits private, She even goes on summer vacations she can't afford and charges them to credit cards. And last year, she bought a brand new car, one with a $700 a month payment that her mom helps her pay off. And here's the part that stings. When the writer expresses concern, she shuts him down, tells him he has no say in her finances. Yet now, she wants him to fund a lifestyle that includes her independent, unchecked spending because his income is higher. That's not partnership, that's convenience. The writer makes it clear if they were truly combining their lives, pooling income, building a future together, sharing goals and sacrifices, then sure, proportional would be fine. Fair even. But that's not what this is. This is someone asking to opt in to the benefits of a shared life without any of the accountability. The writer has a dream. He's pinching pennies to grow his company, to build something stable and long-lasting. He's not out here throwing cash around. Every dollar is planned. Every investment is meaningful. And suddenly, someone he loves is demanding a larger piece of his pie while refusing to open her own kitchen. And so he draws a line. He tells her, if proportional is a must, then we can't live together. And now she's furious, says he's causing her unnecessary stress, that they both can afford proportional, so why not just do it? But the writer knows the truth. This isn't about ability, it's about values. He's not trying to make her suffer. He's trying to protect himself from walking into a situation where he carries the burden financially and emotionally without the balance that makes it feel like a true partnership. And now he's left wondering, am I the asshole? No, you're not. What we're looking at is not just a disagreement. It's a warning sign. You can love someone deeply and still know that you're not aligned where it matters most. The writer's not refusing to help. He's not stingy. In fact, even a 50-50 split would increase his expenses compared to what he's paying now. But he's offering it because it's fair, because it keeps things clear, clean, shared. Relationships thrive on shared vision. And if one person is building a house while the other is poking holes in the roof, it won't matter how strong the foundation is, it's going to crumble. The writer isn't shutting the door on his girlfriend. He's trying to build a door together, one they can both walk through, eyes open, hands joined. But if one person keeps asking for more while refusing to share the map, how can they go anywhere? Am I the asshole for having my husband add me to his Costco account and take his ex-wife off? Some conflicts aren't about money. Not really. They're about symbolism, boundaries, closure, or the lack of it. And when family dynamics meet shared memberships, things that seem small, like a Costco card, suddenly feel like the tip of a much bigger emotional iceberg. That's what the writer's dealing with. After a year of marriage and 2 years together, the writer and her husband are trying to settle into the everyday rhythm of being a blended family. But not just with kids, with exes. The writer's husband has an ex-wife. The two are on friendly terms, civil, cooperative, for the sake of their adult children. And for a while, the ex-wife had remained on the husband's Costco account. That arrangement had worked, until recently. Here's the part that stings. The writer herself used to be on her own ex's Costco account, until one day, out of nowhere, she found herself locked out. Imagine pushing a full cart to the register, ready to swipe, and being told you've been removed. No heads up, no warning, just embarrassment. She left the cart behind. So fast forward to now. The writer, understandably, wants access, not to be petty, not to replace anyone, just to be added to her husband's Costco account. A small thing that represents something larger, permanence, partnership, and let's be real, convenience. But there's a catch. Costco only allows 2 people per account. If the writer's going on, the ex-wife has to come off. Now, this could have been a quiet decision, a passive one. But instead, her husband does something commendable. He tries to call his ex-wife, out of respect, to give her the courtesy the writer herself never received. But she doesn't answer, so he calls her boyfriend instead, also a friend, and he says it's no big deal. Go ahead, do what you need to do. So they do it. The writer is added to the account. Simple as that. No deception, no behind-the-back move. Just a practical step forward. But then, on the drive home, the phone rings. It's the ex-wife, and she's furious. Suddenly, it's not just about a Costco card, it's about being replaced. about being informed after the fact, about the way things feel, not necessarily the way they were handled. She insists she shops there all the time. She says they should have warned her a month in advance that she's contributed to the rebate her ex-husband gets, that it wasn't just a card, it was a symbol of continued shared benefit, shared space, and now it's gone. Let's pause right there. This isn't really about rebates or receipts. It's about history. It's about someone who's had unbroken access to a shared benefit for a decade, now feeling the subtle sting of that chapter finally closing. The writer's husband does try to smooth things over. He offers to pay for her own membership, which, by the way, is more than fair. But even with that olive branch extended, the ex-wife stays upset. And who wouldn't feel a little conflicted? Because this wasn't done maliciously. No one wanted to humiliate her or blindside her, but the truth is, change, even fair change, can still feel like loss. From the outside, it may seem petty. It's just Costco. But for people who've built lives together, even past lives, small routines become emotional territories. She'd been on that account for years. It wasn't just a shared membership. It was a reminder that they hadn't fully untangled. But the writer? She's not the villain here. She didn't demand her husband cut off his ex. She simply wanted to be able to go to Costco like any other wife would, with her own keycard, her own independence, her own place in the structure of the home she now shares. She even made sure it didn't happen the way it happened to her. No ambush, no checkout humiliation. So, was the writer wrong? Absolutely not. If anything, this was handled with more respect than most people would have managed. The husband tried to inform his ex-wife. He didn't do it in secret. He even offered to pay for a new membership, something he didn't have to do. And here's the heart of it. Just because we keep good relationships with our exes doesn't mean they stay in the same roles forever. Being civil isn't the same as remaining entitled to every shared thing indefinitely. The writer is his current wife. It's not unreasonable for her to want that symbolic, logistical space. She's part of the foundation now. She deserves the key card. And the ex-wife, she's allowed to feel sad. Change hurts. But that doesn't make the writer or her husband the villain here. Would I be the asshole for telling my African-American friend she can't gatekeep my culture? There's something incredibly powerful about identity. It roots us. It shapes how we love, how we fight, how we walk through the world. And when it comes to culture, especially the deep, textured traditions passed through generations, it's not just something we own, it's something we feel. The writer is a 26-year-old woman of Asian descent. She's chosen not to specify the exact background, and in a world where everyone feels entitled to every detail, that privacy is already a quiet form of resistance. What we do know is that she's part of a culture where tradition and expression are not only celebrated, but openly shared. In her words, people from her background don't just allow others to wear their cultural clothing. They're thrilled by it, honored, uplifted. And that's where this story begins, with a video. One of the writer's white male friends had taken time off from work to travel through Asia, something many people do, often with varying levels of cultural sensitivity. But this man didn't show up just as a tourist snapping photos at temples. He immersed himself. He showed respect. He attended local events and dressed in the traditional clothing of the writer's culture. Not to mock, not to parade himself, but because it felt right, because it was comfortable, climate appropriate, and given with genuine welcome. Now this is where things start to crack. The video of him in this traditional clothing circulates among the writer's diverse group of friends. And for the most part, there's nothing but support. But then some of her African-American friends react with outrage. Outrage on her behalf. Let that sink in. These weren't members of her cultural group. They weren't her elders. They weren't people who grew up steeped in the same customs. They were friends from a different community, projecting their own deeply personal struggles with appropriation onto a situation that wasn't theirs to mediate. Now here's the thing. Cultural appropriation is a real painful issue, especially for African Americans whose history is deeply entangled with exploitation, erasure, and systemic theft of culture. Their sensitivity is understandable. It's real. It comes from a place of generational trauma. But this wasn't that. This wasn't someone stealing culture for profit. It wasn't someone parodying sacred tradition for Instagram clout. This was a respectful, welcomed moment of cultural exchange. And the writer, the very person whose culture is involved, tried to explain that calmly, thoughtfully. She clarified that in her heritage, this kind of participation is not offensive, but embraced. Most of her friends heard her, most backed off, some even apologized. But then there's her, one friend, one voice that just won't stop, one woman who continues to double down. She's calling this man a colonizer, a thief, a symbol of white privilege. She refuses to hear the writer's voice, the only voice that truly matters in this case, and insists on gatekeeping a culture that isn't hers to gatekeep. Let's pause right there. There's a heavy irony in someone claiming to defend cultural respect by actively ignoring the person they claim to be protecting. The writer isn't just annoyed, she's feeling erased. She's being told how she should feel. She's watching her culture be turned into a political tool in someone else's personal war. And now, the writer is at a crossroads. She's held her tongue, she's tried to explain, she's let the outrage play itself out, but this one friend just won't stop. And now the writer is wondering, would I be the asshole for saying something blunt? For telling her that her outrage offends me more than the clothing ever could? Let's be clear. This isn't about taking sides. This isn't about silencing marginalized voices. This is about listening to the right voice in the right context. This is about understanding that not every experience is universal, and not every battle needs to be fought with the same weapons. What this friend is doing, however well-intentioned, isn't advocacy. It's control. It's drowning out the very person whose culture she's pretending to protect. So, would the writer be the asshole for putting her foot down? No. Absolutely not. She'd be standing up for herself, for her heritage, for her right to define what is and isn't offensive within her own culture. Because if someone truly wants to be an ally, they need to listen more than they speak. And here's the twist. It's not about shutting someone down. It's about drawing a boundary. It's about saying, I appreciate your concern, but this isn't your fight to lead. And I won't let you speak over me in the name of justice when what you're doing is actually the opposite. In the end, the writer isn't the villain here. She's someone trying to preserve the joy in cultural sharing, trying to protect the beauty of welcome in a world that too often leans toward division. And that takes courage. So, was the writer the asshole? No. She was the voice of her own story, reminding someone else that being an ally doesn't mean taking the mic. It means passing it back. Am I the asshole for leaving dinner early after my boyfriend's friend introduced me as the current one? There are moments in life that don't scream. They whisper. They dig deep in silence. Not because they're loud or dramatic, but because they're loaded. And this one? Oh, it was loaded from the moment the words left her mouth. The writer was stepping into something that should have felt special. Dinner with their boyfriend's college friends. A chance to meet the people who shaped him, the ones he shared late-night study sessions and inside jokes with. The kind of night where you expect to feel included, warmly welcomed, maybe even teased a little, but never targeted. But that's not what happened. Instead, the writer met her. She arrived late, probably intentionally so. The kind of entrance that announces itself, even in silence. She scanned the room, eyes sharp, smile too controlled, and when she finally locked eyes on the writer, that was the moment. Oh, so you're the current one. Cute. Now pause here. That's not a joke. That's not playful. That's a statement drenched in condescension, in territory marking, in possessiveness she doesn't have the right to claim. That one line tells a whole story. You're not important, you're just the one here right now, the one who came after others, the placeholder. And the room? Dead quiet, no gasps, no laughter, just silence. Except for one thing. The boyfriend, the person who should have stood up, just chuckled. Not nervously, not protectively. Just a weak, awkward little laugh, like he didn't know where to look, like he wasn't willing to confront it. The writer didn't cause a scene, didn't snap, didn't throw shade or fire back. They just sat there, in silence, for 20 more minutes, stewing in that horrible cocktail of humiliation, rage, and disbelief, because what do you even say when you've just been reduced to a footnote? And then they left. Not dramatically, not storming out with a slammed door or shouted words, just quietly excused themselves, ordered an Uber, went home. Now here's where things take a turn. Later, the boyfriend calls, not to check in, not to apologize, but to scold. He says she didn't mean anything by it, that the writer embarrassed him by making it a thing, that they should have been more chill, more cool, less childish. And get this, he actually says the writer should apologize to her. Apologize to the woman who looked them in the eye and basically said, "You're just passing through." Let's be real for a second. That comment was no accident. That was a test, a power move, an attempt to undermine the writer, to draw a line in the sand and say, "I was here before you and I might be here after you too." And the boyfriend? He failed that test spectacularly. This wasn't about the writer being too sensitive. This wasn't about making a scene. This was about respect, dignity, having your partner's back when someone, anyone, disrespects them to their face. The writer's reaction? Completely fair. Quiet even. They didn't clap back, they didn't drag the dinner into drama. They just removed themselves from a situation where they were clearly not welcome or defended. And yet somehow they're the problem? No, absolutely not. So, is the writer the asshole? The writer did what so many people don't. They held a boundary. They didn't perform for the sake of politeness. They recognized that being disrespected, especially in front of a partner and then being told to just take it, is not love. That's appeasement. That's enabling. The real issue here isn't just the friend's behavior. It's that the boyfriend tolerated it, defended it, prioritized keeping things chill over standing up for the person he claims to care about. Because when someone shows you they won't stand by you publicly, that silence screams. Am I the asshole for letting my girlfriend find something by going through my phone while I slept? There are moments in a relationship that feel quiet on the outside, but inside, they're earth-shaking. The writer didn't plan for this moment. There was no argument, no betrayal, no drama building up over days, just an accidental nap that lasted too long, and the sudden shift in energy that hits like ice when you wake up. His girlfriend was on the couch, silent, cold, that kind of quiet that doesn't feel like peace. It feels like something's wrong. And the truth? Something was. She had gone through his phone while he slept. Let's stop there for a second. That's already a problem, because no matter what's found, no matter what's buried deep in a browser history or tucked away in an app, there's something intimate, invasive about going through someone's device while they're unconscious. There's no conversation in that moment, no trust, just suspicion and searching. Now, the writer isn't some player. He's not juggling DMs or living a double life. In fact, he's barely had relationship experience at all. His first girlfriend, his first love, is now the woman he's dating again, almost a decade later. The years in between were marked by heartbreak, cheating, and someone who used him. He didn't come into this relationship with games. He came in with scars. And up until that night, things had been good. No, better than good. He describes the last 2 years as amazing, peaceful, whole. But then, the phone. His girlfriend went through everything, every message, every app, every corner of his digital life. And all she found, the only thing, was this. 1. He had once clicked a link tree on a random girl's Instagram account. 2. He had once scrolled through 10 to 15 TikTok videos of a goth girl. That's it. And the context, surprisingly mundane. That Instagram account, it belonged to a woman who owned a newer Supra. Her IG was listed on the car's window sticker. The writer, who's a mechanic, made a light joke in the shop that the car probably belonged to an OnlyFans model. He clicked the link tree to see if he was right. He didn't even go beyond that. The app history backed him up. No further links were clicked. Then, weeks later, a TikTok pops up of a goth girl. The writer's girlfriend is also goth, so there was a kind of aesthetic familiarity. He scrolled, didn't interact, didn't follow, just watched and left. And now she's saying the relationship is destroyed. Now she's telling him she can't trust him anymore, that the love is gone. And the writer, he's heartbroken, confused, reeling. Because yes, he admits it. He feels bad. Not because he cheated, not because he did anything deeply wrong, but because she feels hurt. And when someone you love is hurt, even when it doesn't make sense to you, it still cuts deep. But at the same time, he's left asking, Did I really do something so awful? Or is she looking for a reason to walk away? Let's sit with that. This isn't about whether clicking on a link tree or scrolling through TikToks is morally wrong. This is about intent, about trust, about whether tiny passing moments online are enough to erase 2 years of what the writer thought was love. Because relationships, real ones, aren't just built on avoiding mistakes. They're built on assuming the best of someone, on choosing to believe they're telling the truth, especially when the evidence supports it. The writer didn't flirt, didn't cheat, didn't save images or send messages or hide apps. His phone was open. That's how she found it. If he wanted to hide something, he could have, but he didn't, because he wasn't doing anything that felt like betrayal to him. And now he's being treated like a man who broke something sacred. Is it possible his girlfriend has a different threshold for what feels like betrayal? Sure. Everyone's boundaries look different. For some, a scroll is harmless. For others, it's emotional infidelity. But what makes this painful is that there was no conversation beforehand about this boundary. He didn't agree to that rule. He didn't knowingly cross a line. He acted in what felt like innocent, passing curiosity. And that's not the same as disloyalty. But here's the hard truth. If trust was truly strong, would she need to dig through his phone in the middle of the night? If love was steady, would it vanish over a couple of clicks? That's what makes this so heartbreaking. Not just the hurt, but the disproportionate reaction. As if all the memories, the care, the months of loyalty meant nothing the moment she found something just barely questionable. So, is the writer the asshole? No. He's not perfect. But he's not the villain here. He didn't hide anything. He didn't betray her. If anything, he's trying to figure out why something so small felt like the end of the world to someone he thought loved him. And maybe, just maybe, this isn't about what he did. Maybe it's about something in her. Something that already doubted, already feared, already felt like love was fragile. And the moment she saw something that confirmed that fear, she ran with it. And in that case, the writer wasn't the one breaking trust. He was the one being tested and not given a chance to explain. Am I the asshole for keeping the bridesmaid dress and wearing it after I got kicked out of the wedding? This story isn't about a dress. Not really. It's about friendship, fractured and distant. It's about the line between grace and pride. And it's about how sometimes what should be a celebration becomes a battlefield over tools, sequins, and unspoken expectations. The writer is 26, once close with the bride-to-be, friends from college, the kind who shared midnight snacks and 3 a.m. heart-to-hearts. But life moved on. The connection faded into a soft silence. So when the writer got asked to be a bridesmaid, she was surprised. Flattered, sure, but surprised. And from the beginning, things didn't feel right. Planning spiraled into something overwhelming. The bride, her old friend, wasn't just managing details, she was micromanaging people. Every nail color, every lash style, every inch of fabric had to be part of the aesthetic. And the bridal party? They weren't being treated like friends anymore. More like props in her Pinterest perfect dream. The breaking point? Nails. Fake, long nails. The writer works in healthcare. She can't do long fake nails. It's a matter of hygiene and practicality. So she said as much in the group chat. Calmly, rationally. But instead of understanding, the bride snapped back with, "Then maybe you're not a fit for the bridal party." That's the moment right there. The line in the sand. And the writer, she didn't argue, didn't plead. She simply said, "Maybe I'm not." Days later, the text came. She was officially out of the bridal party, but she could still attend the wedding as a guest, the bride offered. And that was humiliating. Imagine being removed from something so publicly after already spending over $350 on the dress, shoes, and alterations. Time, money, emotional energy, all down the drain. And now she was expected to smile through it from the sidelines? So she asked, respectfully, if she could still wear the dress to the wedding. After all, it was paid for. She couldn't return it. It was a tasteful light blue, nothing wild. But the bride shut that down hard. "Absolutely not," she said. Only bridesmaids were to wear that dress. She didn't want any reminders of negativity in her wedding photos. That's a line that stings. Like the writer herself was a smudge on the lens. So the writer didn't go. She stayed home. But that dress, it still existed. It still looked good. And 2 days later, she wore it to brunch, a formal brunch, one with a dress code. And the theme? Light colors. And guess what? All her other dresses were too dark. Reds, greens, blacks. Some were white, which was obviously off the table. So she wore the dress, she posted pictures, nothing scandalous, just brunch photos. Tagged the boutique where the dress came from. Smiled for the camera. But mutual friends noticed. And the bride? She was furious. She sent a long message accusing the writer of being disrespectful, of trying to ruin her wedding vibe, of being intentional in stirring the pot. But to the writer, this wasn't about revenge. It was a dress, an expensive one, a practical choice. It just happened to be the same dress in the same color from a wedding she was uninvited to participate in. And let's be honest here. When you take someone out of your wedding, can you really demand control over what they do with their clothes afterward? Here's the thing. The writer didn't crash the wedding in the dress. She didn't post photos with a petty caption. She didn't wear it to a bridal event or show up uninvited. She wore it 2 days later to brunch because life moves on, because people reclaim their dignity in quiet, beautiful ways. So, is the writer the asshole? Let's really look at this. She was removed from the bridal party for not agreeing to wear long fake nails, something incompatible with her actual job. She swallowed her pride. She didn't make a scene. She asked permission before showing up in the dress, and when denied, she simply bowed out, quietly, and wearing the dress afterward to a non-wedding event? That isn't drama. That's just using what you've already paid for. The idea that the bride expected her to retire the dress forever, like it carried some kind of curse, that's not realistic. That's control disguised as sentimentality. And sure, maybe posting pictures so soon did get people talking, but again, the writer didn't do anything malicious. No captions shading the bride, no intentional call-outs, just a woman in a beautiful dress enjoying brunch. And honestly, after being cast aside like a forgotten accessory in someone else's aesthetic fantasy, who could blame her for wanting to feel beautiful? So no, this isn't about a dress. It's about respect, boundaries, and knowing your worth, even when someone tries to make you feel replaceable. Am I the asshole for ordering alcohol on my solo trip? There's something deeply empowering and just a little bit defiant about traveling alone. You're not following someone else's itinerary. You don't have to compromise over what to eat, where to go, or how long to linger in a museum. It's just you, your thoughts, and the entire world laid out in front of you. That kind of solitude, it can be beautiful, healing even. But sometimes people don't see it that way. The writer, taking some much-needed solo time, chose Tenerife for their escape. Sun, sea, and all-inclusive service, a perfect blend for someone looking to rest without having to constantly hunt down a new place to eat alone. The hotel setup was interesting. Think cruise ship dining, but on land. Large communal tables meant to spark conversation among strangers. It sounds wholesome, maybe even charming, until it isn't. The writer was seated first, enjoying a well-deserved glass of wine. Just one glass, quiet, unbothered. But then came them, a family of 5, 2 adults, 3 children, and a mountain of judgment hiding behind polite smiles. The mother turned to the writer and said, "Cool as ice. We do not wish to expose our children to women drinking alcohol." It wasn't a request, it was a warning. Now pause. Imagine sitting there, alone, minding your business, only to be told your simple act of enjoying a glass of wine is some sort of moral threat. The writer didn't react with hostility. No shouting, no passive aggression, just a smile and a suggestion. Perhaps you should ask to move tables if it's an issue. Calm, direct, reasonable. But you could feel the tension start to thicken in the air. The family noticed the writer was alone, and that's when the snide remarks began, quiet digs, thinly veiled, aimed not just at the wine, but at the very act of being alone, as if solitude was something to pity or mock. When the writer got up to grab food, the wine vanished. Just gone. And then came the waiter, confused, even a bit concerned. He asked to see the writer's wristband, the same one all all-inclusive guests wear. Turns out the family had told him the writer was underage and had sneaked away from their parents. Let that sink in. They didn't just express discomfort. They didn't just judge from a distance. They actively tried to ruin a stranger's evening by lying to staff. They escalated. They crossed a line. The writer, composed as ever, showed ID. The waiter apologized profusely and returned with a new glass of wine, just as the family returned with their plates. Now here's the part where the story takes a delicious turn. The writer, they didn't shrink. They didn't let that humiliation sit heavy on their chest. No. They looked that moment right in the eye and chose power. They politely requested not just another glass, but the whole bottle. And to top it off, a couple of shots of vodka. A bold move, yes, but let's be honest, it wasn't just about the alcohol. It was a quiet, deliberate reclamation. A message written not in words but in action. I will not be shamed for existing. I will not apologize for taking up space. And when the vodka hit the table and the writer took their first shot, the family stormed out. No polite excuses. No parting smiles. Just dramatic, indignant retreat. Like they expected the writer to shrink under the weight of their judgment and couldn't handle the fact that she didn't flinch. Now, some might argue the writer escalated the situation, that asking for the full bottle and the vodka was a little extra. But when someone lies about your age, tries to have your drink taken away, and then has the audacity to mock you for dining alone, that's not just rudeness, that's an attack on your dignity. This wasn't about alcohol, this was about control. And when they couldn't control the writer, they tried to shame her instead. So, is the writer the asshole for ordering alcohol? Or is this just what it looks like when someone refuses to be bullied into invisibility? There's something poetic about it, really. One person trying to enjoy peace and freedom, the other offended by the sight of it. The writer didn't scream, didn't fight. She just raised her glass, and in one small act of defiance, reminded everyone at that table, and now everyone listening, what it means to stand your ground. Am I the asshole for not wanting to babysit my girlfriend's nephew on my first Father's Day? There's something sacred about firsts. Your first steps, your first love, your first child. And then there's the quiet, powerful moment when the world recognizes you not just as a partner or a boyfriend, but as a father. For the writer, this Sunday was supposed to be that moment, a celebration of a new chapter, a symbolic pause in the chaos of parenting, a single day to reflect, rest, and feel seen. But instead of that, the writer is facing tension, disappointment, and if we're being honest, a little heartbreak. The writer is a new father, just 7 months into this wild journey, still navigating the sleepless nights, the diapers, the emotional weight of it all. And yet, he's shown up. He's been there. He's earned this day. But when Father's Day rolls around, the spotlight doesn't stay on him for long. His girlfriend's brother, a man who, by the writer's own words, doesn't even like him, asks for a favor. Not a small one either. He and his girlfriend want to go out on Father's Day, so they ask the writer and his girlfriend to babysit their child. Let that sink in. On the writer's very first Father's Day, a day that should have been about him bonding with his own little family, he's being asked to spend it watching someone else's kid. It's not that the nephew is the problem. In fact, the writer even admits that the kid is great. And this isn't a story of someone refusing to help family. He's helped before. They've babysat this nephew multiple times. But this day was supposed to be different. So the writer says no, calmly, politely, no anger, no argument, just a boundary. He tells his girlfriend he wants to spend Father's Day with her and their baby. A quiet day, a small celebration, just the three of them, the way she got to experience her own first Mother's Day. And yet her reaction? Not understanding, not support, not even a compromise. She gets salty, passive-aggressive, the kind of emotional undercurrent that doesn't need to be spoken to be felt in every room, every glance, every sigh. And now the writer's sitting here questioning himself, wondering if he's being selfish, wondering if expecting one day, a single day for himself as a father is somehow asking too much. Let's pause here and get real. There's a difference between being helpful and being taken for granted. And right now it feels like the writer's needs are being quietly dismissed in favor of keeping the peace for someone who doesn't even respect him. This isn't just about a babysitting request, it's about what it represents. The girlfriend's brother only ever reaches out when he needs something. He doesn't like the writer. They don't talk. There's no relationship there. And yet, somehow, his plans get prioritized over a milestone in the writer's life. That hurts. Even if no one says it out loud, that hurts. Especially when the memory of his girlfriend's first Mother's Day is still fresh. Just the three of them, no distractions, no favors being asked. He gave her that peace, that space, that moment. And now he's wondering why he can't have the same. Let's not sugarcoat it. Parenting is hard, and new dads in particular often get the short end of the emotional stick. Society praises moms, rightfully, but often forgets the fathers quietly holding everything together behind the scenes. All the writer wanted was recognition, to be seen, to be celebrated, not with a big party or gifts or praise, but simply presence. His girlfriend's presence, his child's presence, their family's presence. So is he the asshole? No, not even close. He didn't demand anything unreasonable. He didn't make this about ego or pride. He just wanted one day to be about his fatherhood journey. And honestly, that's the bare minimum. It's okay to set boundaries. It's okay to say, not this time. And it's okay to ask your partner to stand beside you, not just in shared responsibility, but in emotional support. Because when someone becomes a parent, especially for the first time, it's not just about what they do for the child. It's about how they grow into that role, how they're honored in it, how they're seen in it. And this writer, he just wanted to feel like Father's Day actually meant something. And in this case, it absolutely should have. Would I be the asshole for taking my coffee maker when I leave? Let's set the stage. The writer has been in the trenches of a 5-year PhD program in STEM, a world of pressure, precision, and endless deadlines. The kind of place where caffeine isn't just a preference, it's a lifeline. And if you've ever known anyone in academia, especially in STEM, you know that coffee isn't just a drink. It's ritual, it's survival. So the writer, being the responsible kind of caffeine addict, comes prepared, not with one coffee maker, not even 2, but 3. That's right, the writer keeps a backup for the backup. One of these machines, a humble thrift store find, gets a permanent home at the writer's workplace. For years, it stands alone, a one-user machine, quietly humming away in a corner, loyally fueling long nights and early mornings for the one person who respects its purpose. Enter Anne. Anne, the postdoc who shows up in year 4, brings more than just a new perspective. She brings chaos disguised as casual conversation. You know the type. Friendly. Overly so. The kind of friendly that lingers. She's the coworker who doesn't seem to recognize a tight deadline or the social cue of someone saying, I really need to focus right now. No matter what the writer does, Anne finds a way to hover, to interrupt, to turn every moment into a drawn-out monologue about dishwashers. Now here's where it gets tricky. Anne discovers the coffee maker, and suddenly the once exclusive bond between the writer and her beloved little machine is broken. Anne becomes a full-on leech for caffeine, admitting boldly that she no longer brews her own coffee at home because she knows the office one is there. Courtesy of the writer. That's not casual usage, that's dependence. And let's not forget, Anne hasn't exactly been a joy to work with. She's dismissive, patronizing, and completely oblivious to the emotional temperature of a room. She steamrolls opinions, she talks over people, and despite being newer to the team, she acts like the only authority in the building. So now, as the writer prepares to finally leave this chapter behind, diploma in hand ready to dive into real research, there's one last question to answer. Should she take the coffee maker with her? And it's not just about the machine, it's about principle, respect, boundaries. That little thrift store coffee maker became a symbol of independence, of sanity, and of the long hours the writer put in when no one else cared about her grind. And yet, there's a voice, a tug, a reminder that even if Anne was never the best coworker, the machine was technically a gift from the writer to herself, not to the team. And leaving it behind would be an act of kindness, or depending on how you see it, an undeserved gesture. Let's pause here, because this is where the emotion sneaks in. This isn't just about caffeine. This is about how women in academic spaces often get bulldozed, dismissed, or treated like they're junior, even when they've been putting in the work, sometimes more than the so-called experts around them. This is about quiet victories, about drawing the line between being kind and being a pushover, about choosing which hills are really worth dying on. So, would the writer be the asshole for packing up that tiny, well-loved machine and giving it the farewell it deserves? Turns out no, because in a final twist, the writer decides to leave it behind. Not because Anne earned it, not because she asked, but because the writer knows who she is, and she doesn't need to stoop to petty when she's already won. She's graduating, moving on, starting a new job where coffee will be free, and hopefully so will her peace of mind. Sometimes the biggest flex isn't revenge, it's walking away. And in case anyone was wondering, no, the writer isn't a bitter old man. She's just a tired, slightly irritated woman who's earned the right to roll her eyes and sip her own damn coffee. So, was the writer the asshole? Absolutely not. She's just human, petty, and principled. And sometimes those two things can coexist beautifully. Am I the asshole for the way I chose to handle my friends wanting to split a dinner bill? Sometimes it's not about money. It's about being heard, being respected. It's about setting boundaries in a group where you were once the easy one, the one who always chipped in without fuss, who kept things smooth, who swallowed the little injustices for the sake of keeping the vibe alive. But eventually, everyone has a line. And for the writer, this was it. Let's rewind. Years ago, the writer realized his friend group had developed a habit, one that chipped away at him over time. They'd go out to dinner, order freely, cocktails, desserts, the whole 9 yards, and when the check landed on the table, that familiar, awkward silence would set in. And like clockwork, the just split it evenly chorus would begin. The writer? He was always the one with the modest meal, a drink or two, tops. No appetizers, no triple chocolate bomb cake. Just enough to enjoy the night without going overboard. Because, well, he was watching what he ate. He had a sedentary job. He didn't feel like paying for everyone's indulgences. And frankly, why should he? Eventually it came to a head. He spoke up. They agreed. Everyone would pay their own bill going forward. And for a while, things were good. Peaceful even. But new people bring new dynamics. One of the guys got married about 6 months ago, and his wife joined the group. She was friendly, outgoing, and quickly became close with the writer's girlfriend. Sometimes it was the four of them. Double dates, fun nights out, laughter over good food. But slowly, the issue began to creep back in, because she liked to split the bill. It's just easier, she'd say. Easier for who, though? The writer tried to let it go. He didn't want to rock the boat again. But when someone keeps nudging your boundary over and over, eventually, you push back. So last time, he planned it differently. He asked his girlfriend to drive. That wasn't random. That was a choice, a statement. Because this time, he was ordering what he wanted. No more holding back, no more budgeting his enjoyment while others ordered like they had a black card. He got an old-fashioned, not just any, made with very good bourbon. Smooth, warm, expensive. And when it was done, he ordered another and another. He wasn't sloppy, he wasn't belligerent. He was composed, quiet even, but sipping steadily, letting the tab rise like the tension in the room. Then came the check. Before anyone could speak, the writer suggested, let's all just pay for what we ordered. But the wife? She brushed it off. That's silly, let's just split it. And that was the trap. Because when the waiter dropped the bill and she saw the breakdown, how the writer's bourbon alone made up a third of the entire tab, suddenly she started backpedaling, said she didn't realize it was so lopsided, said maybe splitting wasn't so fair after all. The writer? Cool as ever. He agreed. No anger, no smugness, just calm confirmation. Let's each pay our own. But here's where things get murky. Later, his girlfriend confronted him, said he was an asshole, said he ran up the bill on purpose just to make a point, that it wasn't about the drinks, it was about proving something. And maybe she's not entirely wrong, because yes, the writer was making a point. But was that point so unreasonable? This wasn't some petty stunt. He didn't fake politeness then drop the bomb. He drank what he wanted and offered to pay for what he ordered. It was others who insisted on splitting. He just gave them a taste of their own medicine. Let's be honest. Restaurant systems in 2025 can handle split checks. Most waiters expect it. Saying it's just easier is code for, I don't want to do the math. But that easier often comes at someone else's expense. And for too long, that expense had been the writer's. So is he the asshole? Or is this what it looks like when someone calmly enforces a boundary and doesn't apologize for it? The moment you feel like you have to spend more than you want just to keep up, or worse, to keep things peaceful, you're not at dinner anymore. You're buying silence. And eventually that cost becomes personal. This wasn't revenge. This was restraint, slowly running out. Am I the asshole for siding with our son after he screamed at my wife? Some conflicts don't start with shouting. They begin in a quiet room over something deceptively small, an item of clothing, a few words taken the wrong way, or a parent just trying to get through the day. But before you know it, emotions surge, lines are drawn, and suddenly you're wondering how something so minor spiraled into something that threatens to ruin your entire week, or worse, your family dynamic. That's where the writer finds himself. A father, a husband, a man trying to keep the peace just one day before a big family trip, while stuck between his wife and his young autistic son, Jake. Now let's pause here for a second. Jake is 8, mildly autistic, not nonverbal, not isolated, not unreachable, but sensitive. He feels things deeply, sometimes more than people give him credit for. He's a sports-loving, video game-playing kid with the emotional radar of someone who already sees the world a little differently. That kind of sensitivity, it's a gift, but it also makes moments like this hit that much harder. So, picture the scene. The writer is spending quality time with Jake, enjoying a simple round of video games, a quiet evening before travel. Nothing dramatic, until Jake's mom calls into the bedroom. 10 seconds later, "Are you serious? Who the hell do you think you are? Get that stupid thing away from me!" It wasn't just yelling, it was explosive. The kind of outburst that makes you think something truly serious just happened. But when the writer walks in, he doesn't see broken glass or a destroyed toy. He sees his wife holding up a pink, sparkly shirt. Let that land for a moment. Covered in glitter, loud in color, featuring a celebrity Jake clearly wants nothing to do with. And she wasn't just holding it, she was trying to force him to try it on. Why? Because Jake's cousin Jennifer, who they're about to visit, might be around the same size. She wanted to test the fit. Functional, sure, but also careless, especially for a kid like Jake. The writer could see it immediately. Jake was overwhelmed, on the verge of tears, angry, confused, humiliated. That moment wasn't just about the shirt, it was about being dismissed, about being told, without words, that his boundaries didn't matter. And what did Jake do? He snapped. He yelled. He ran. 8 years old and already pushed to his emotional limit. Now, the writer could have tried to discipline the behavior, could have told Jake to apologize, but instead, he did something that many parents struggle to do in these moments. He validated him. The writer looked at his wife and said what she didn't expect to hear. "You should have known better." And that's when the rift deepened. The wife didn't see her mistake. She doubled down, said it was just a shirt, that after everything they do for Jake, his therapy, his appointments, his activities, trying on the shirt was the least he could do. Let's take a beat right there. Because when a parent says something like that, when they frame their child's very existence as a debt to be repaid, it's more than just frustration. It reveals a mindset, a dangerous one. Parenting isn't transactional. You don't do it for points. You do it because you chose to raise a human being. And with that comes the responsibility to understand who that human being is. But in that moment, she made it clear. She saw Jake's reaction as ingratitude, and worse, she wanted him punished. And the writer, he said, absolutely not. He wasn't going to punish their autistic son right before a trip because he didn't want to wear a glittery pink shirt designed for a girl. He knew that wasn't just about clothes, it was about identity, autonomy, and the right to say no. Then came the line that truly broke the room. "Yeah, no shit, he screamed at you. You tried to make him try on girls' clothes. I'd yell at my mom if she pulled that on me." And from there, everything froze. Dinner skipped. The wife refused to cook. The writer ordered pizza, practical, efficient, and frankly smart the night before a long trip. But she didn't see it that way. To her, it was rewarding Jake's tantrum. To her, it wasn't dinner. It was betrayal. Now it's the next morning. The tension is still thick, the silence colder than ever. And the writer, He's exhausted, frustrated, caught between a child who feels unheard and a partner who refuses to bend. And just to top it off, the writer knows what's coming next. His sister-in-law, the one who always takes his wife's side, the one who, without fail, will offer her 2 cents whether it's wanted or not. Because that's the cherry on top of every family drama Sunday, isn't it? The unsolicited opinion. So here's the big question. Is the writer the asshole for siding with his son after he screamed at his wife? Or is he just a father who understood something in that moment his wife didn't? That parenting, especially parenting a neurodivergent child, isn't about control. It's about compassion. That kids, even when they lash out, are still trying to be heard. That a child doesn't owe you obedience just because you take them to therapy. And that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stand in front of your kid and say, "I've got your back." This wasn't about disrespect. This was about emotional safety. And sometimes siding with your kid, even when it causes a rift, isn't weakness, it's strength. Am I the asshole for not adjusting our China trip to my brother-in-law's cardio limits? The writer, a 39-year-old husband and father, didn't just plan a family vacation. He was orchestrating a once-in-a-lifetime journey into heritage, memory, and culture. What started as a simple trip to China soon became a full-on odyssey, with family from different corners of the US converging on the land that shaped their roots. For context, the writer and his sister were born in China, but the immigrant journey took their family to Dallas, Texas, when they were still young. She stayed there, built a life with her husband Doug, and had a son. The writer, meanwhile, settled in the Pacific Northwest, raising 2 kids of his own. Both siblings inherited more than just traditions from their parents. They carried with them a legacy of discipline, healthy living, and cultural pride. Doug? Doug comes from a different world entirely. Now let's talk about Doug, the brother-in-law, the man who equates fruit snacks with actual fruit, who fires up his massive Grand Wagoneer to travel what others would call a short stroll. He's not incapacitated, not on a mobility scooter, but let's just say cardio isn't exactly his strong suit. And still, when this China trip was being planned, Doug was all in. And more than that, their 12-year-old son had just finished a school unit on ancient China. He was practically vibrating with excitement over the terracotta warriors and the thought of walking the same paths his ancestors once did. This wasn't just a vacation, it was an education, a reconnection, a rite of passage. The writer, being the one with strong roots still in China, offered to plan the trip. And let's be clear, he didn't hide the fact that walking would be a major part of the experience. This wasn't an all-inclusive cruise or a resort getaway. This was China, ancient cities, stone stairways, bustling street markets and winding paths, places where taxis can't go and wheels give way to footwork. But Doug, good old Doug, brushed off those warnings. Maybe he thought the writer was exaggerating, or maybe he simply didn't understand that in much of China, walking is not optional, it's essential. Whatever the case, once boots hit the ground, the reality was immediate and brutal. Doug couldn't keep up. In Xi'an, in Nanjing, in Beijing, Doug lagged. He was winded, irritable, and often had to stop. His wife, the writer's sister, stayed back with him often, while the writer and his wife forged ahead with the kids, trying to maintain pace with the guided tours and not miss what they came for. But it all came to a head in their final stop, their grandmother's hometown near Chongqing. Now, if you've never been to this part of China, let me paint a picture for you. The terrain is basically vertical. Steep hills, endless stairs, slippery stone paths winding through dense humidity. It's beautiful, yes, but it demands stamina, especially when the sun's high and the air feels like soup. On one particularly sweltering day, the writer decided to take the kids to the local market, but not just through any route. He wanted to walk them through a park built by their own family generations ago. It wasn't just a shortcut, it was a living memory, a connection to history. Doug, seeing them leave, insisted on joining. The writer warned him, gently but clearly, it's a long walk, it's not flat. Doug shrugged it off, and so he came. Half a mile in, Doug was wheezing, slowing, falling behind. The kids were darting ahead, energized and excited. The writer did slow down. He didn't just leave Doug behind without care. But eventually it became clear this wasn't working. Doug needed to turn back. The writer urged him to grab a taxi while he continued with the kids. They made it to the market. The kids saw the park. They walked the paths their ancestors may have once walked, and they returned full of stories and wonder. But home wasn't waiting with smiles. Doug was sulking. His wife, the writer's sister, was angry. She said the writer should have just taken a taxi, that he didn't consider Doug's physical limitations, that he should have adjusted the entire trip, in fact, around Doug's capacity. And here's where it gets real. Let's talk about whose trip this was. This wasn't some random vacation. This was their children's first deep dive into their heritage. For the writer's nephew, it was his first time seeing the land of his ancestors. For the writer's own kids, it was their first visit to China's historic cities. Do you shape that trip around someone who chose not to prepare, who was warned in advance and still acted like it would all be fine? Could the writer have done more? Maybe. Could he have built in more rest days, maybe a few shorter excursions? But here's the thing, and this is the part that matters. He didn't neglect Doug out of malice. He prioritized the children's experience. He chose legacy over convenience. And that matters. The writer didn't force Doug to come along. He didn't push him up hills. He didn't abandon him without warning. Doug had every opportunity to bow out gracefully or take alternate routes. And yet, the one being blamed isn't the man who refused to listen. It's the man who held the map, who made sure the kids saw the soul of their family history. So now, the writer is left with a question. Am I the asshole for not adjusting our China trip to my brother-in-law's cardio limits? Absolutely not. You crafted an experience your children and nephew will carry forever. You showed them not just monuments, but meaning. And Doug had a choice every step of the way. He chose pride over practicality. You didn't leave him behind. He refused to keep up.